Lord, I done. Lord, I done. Lord, I done what you told me to do. Talking about Lord, I done. Lord, I done. Lord, I done. Well, I done what you told me to do. Well, you told me to pray, and I done that too.
My name is William Edward Bazzelle. My date of birth was December 30th, 1943, and I was born in Hope, Arkansas, in my parents' home. The home in Hope was a two-bedroom house. In fact, I was born in one of those bedrooms. Two bedrooms, one bath, living room, dining room, kitchen. A very small house. It's like most homes at that time. As teachers, I guess we were probably better off than a lot of people that lived in Hope, but that wasn't all that great either. You did what you had at that time. The only black doctor in Hope at the time lived on the street. In fact, his son and I were good friends. Dr. Lewis, Roscoe Lewis is his name. Next door to me was the principal of Yerger High School in Hope, which we actually lived right across the street from the school in Hope, but I didn't go to that school. I went to school in Ralston. But living there enabled me to have friends in both, so I had friends in Ralston as well as I had friends that went to school in Hope, Arkansas as well. I went to elementary school at Ralston, at the school there where my parents taught. And then when I became 5, I was always at school anytime, so they said, why don't you just let him go to school? So I started first grade at the age of 5. I was doing so well there that they skipped me to second grade, so I finished 2 grades in 1 year. So I ended up graduating from high school at the age of 16. My great-grandparents were Casbury Bazzelle and Matilda Young, who became Matilda Bazzelle. They were both born into slavery in the 1840s. Matilda, when she grew up, she day nursed the family that owned them at the time, the Barksdales. Then they became married after that. Because of the affinity of the young man that she nursed as part of her slave job, she became friends with her son, who was Christopher Columbus Bazzelle, my grandfather. And they remained friends throughout their lives, and that was influential as a part of his life as well. He was born in 1874, I believe the year was, and my grandmother, his wife was Jacksie Hicks. She was also born in the 1870s, I believe, and she passed away in 1940s as well. He passed away in 1956. I knew him quite well. He was always the kind of person who everyone wanted to help, and he was able to help a lot of people. He was always outgoing and giving. He wanted to make sure that kids in the community had a place to go to school and be educated and get the best education they could get. He worked hard to make that happen. The Barksdales donated land for a school in Arkansas. At that time, there was no school in that area where black kids could go to school. So he donated land for the purpose of a church. Actually, the church is still there, and school. And the school was held in the church. And my grandfather was one of the teachers in the school. And my father actually went to school in that church. That building lasted until it burned, and then the WPA program built the actual school building. The actual one I went to was that same building. It started out as Oak Grove Church and Oak Grove School. Kind of a little story there in that In Arkansas, there were very few places for African American kids to go to school. When they got to school at Oak Grove, it was 1 through 8. Eventually, they worked hard to make it a high school, and then it became a high school in the 30s. And at that time, kids from other places were coming to go to school at that location, and they would have to live with families in the area. So eventually the school installed dormitories, so it became a boarding school. And at that time is when it became Nevada County Training School. Through the years, it maintained the dormitories, and kids would come from all over, not only from places in Arkansas, but from other states just to go to school there, because it was one of the premier schools in the country at that time for African Americans. And it continued to operate until the early 80s, when it finally closed, because when the 1954 segregation program ended, and then in the 60s, when actually integration began, this was following the Little Rock 9 program and all of that, the white districts began to say, oh, well, we want to take the black kids to go to our school in order to get our population up. And then in the 80s, they merged all of the small schools in the county into one, and all the kids go to one school today. My grandfather, at his death, he had 176 acres, I remember, of land in the community there. Whenever a family would decide that they didn't want their land anymore, he would buy it. And so he just accumulated a lot of land around that community, which is unusual for an African American in Nevada County, Arkansas. Actually, the deal with the WPA to build the new school was that the community had to supply the materials. So my grandfather, who had land, had some timber, worked with the white kid that his mother had nourished, who had a sawmill. So they worked a deal where my grandfather would give him the logs, and then he would trade that for finished lumber, which was used to actually build the school. Then the other community people would chip in and donate other things to make sure that the building was constructed. My father was born in 1898 in a log cabin in Ralston, Arkansas. He grew up staying with his grandparents, and he started out in that one-room school at Oak Grove, 1 through 8. Then he went to finish his high school in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, at Arkansas AM&N College. After that, he was interested in improving his education and interested also in auto mechanics, because cars were just coming along in that time period. So he moved to Kansas City, where he found a job working for an African American as a chauffeur. So he had a car and a place to stay, because you lived with whoever you worked for at that time. So he was doing well as a young man in Kansas City. At that time, he also went to college there. He did 2 years of college in Kansas City. And then after that, my grandfather called him, or no, what that meant was he probably wrote him a letter at that time and told him he needed him to come back to Ralston to teach at the school, because the students need good teachers. And he thought he would be a good teacher. And my dad said he was really not happy about that. I mean, being a single man in Kansas City, had a car, had a place to live, had money to spend, so he was happy, but then he decided he would do what his dad told him to do, as a good child would do, and he moved back to Ralston, Arkansas, where he became a teacher. At that time, you could teach in school. If you had 2 years of college education, you could get a certificate, which he did. He then taught auto mechanics, math, and science. Eventually worked his way up to being a principal at one of the elementary schools. When I was there, he was the math teacher. And so actually I took math from my dad in school there. But he also was a farmer at the same time, as everyone there is a farmer. So he was farming. He had land and he had cows, and we grew pine trees. He was also very religious, spent a lot of time with the churches in the area of Hope, Arkansas. One of the things he and his friend put together was called a benevolent society. It's really kind of a burial association. A lot of times people would die and the family would not be able to afford to bury them. So you put together 25 cents a month and they would guarantee that you would have enough funds to put you away when your life ended. He worked in the community to ensure that other kids had jobs. He would ensure that people had a chance to go to school. And his philosophy was, no matter what your job was, do it the best you can do. No matter what it is, be your best at all times, be successful. And if you do that, life will turn you a good favor. CC Camps was giving people jobs, a part of the New Deal program. And so he was in the CC Camps, and in that camp, he did auto mechanic work for them at that time. And in fact, that got him a good recommendation for a job, being able to repair vehicles, and he was a hard worker as well. That enabled him also to help people, which is something he always wanted to do and wanted to encourage me to do as well. He was very conservative. He would not spend a penny if he didn't have to. He was just a different kind of person, I guess. After his retirement, he stayed there until we felt it was better for him to live with us here in Delaware, so he moved to Delaware and lived with us until he passed away in 2003. So he died at an age of 104. We had a wonderful time while he was here, and I learned a lot from him. My mother's name was Maddie Brannon. She was born in 1905 in Mount Pleasant, Texas. She grew up with her parents there who were farmers. However, her mother and father passed away when my mother was 14. And so at that time, she moved in with a cousin in Texarkana, Arkansas. She then went to school in Texarkana through high school, and then she, being one of the few in her family able to go to college, she went to a school called Bishop College, which at that time was in Marshall, Texas. She got a degree there and was working in that area. So my dad got introduced to this lady in Texarkana who someone thought he ought to meet. And it turned out that that became a husband and wife. They got married in 1941, and I came along in 43. My mother also worked at the school in Oak Grove in Ralston, Arkansas, and eventually became the principal of the high school. She ran the district for 1 year, and during that time, she was able to start an adult school. A lot of the adults in the Ralston area at that time had never gone to school. They did not have their GEDs. And so she put together an adult school, which she would use the school teachers to teach at night and on weekends for a little small stipend to teach these adults. And a lot of the adults there got their education, got their GEDs through that program. She was also very, very active and influential in the clubs in Hope, Arkansas. I call myself a country boy because I grew up in the country down there. The school had small cottages for teachers. We had a 2-room cottage with a small kitchen, and that's where we spent Sunday night through Thursday night at the school, which was right across the street from the school itself. So I had no trouble getting to school. Just about everyone left on the weekends. We went to Hope, and the other teachers would leave to go back to their homes on the weekends. We had a relationship in two separate communities at that time. In Hope, we did have running water in the building at the house and plumbing, but in Ralston we did not. There was a spigot outside. We would go get the water for the house. But it was about 1954 or 55, the school got a grant to host a youth camp. And a part of the grant paid for installing indoor plumbing in the buildings. But up until then, we had no indoor plumbing in any of the buildings, none of either the school buildings or where the teachers lived. We all used the outdoor toilets at the time. There were black businesses in Hope. There was a hotel, there was a restaurant there, naturally a pool hall and things like that. Hope was segregated this time. Remember, this was all during the period, everything was segregated. You had the segregated water fountain, segregated restrooms, all that, and all the public places were like that. It was a strained relationship. We did not associate with the whites in Arkansas that much. The business people were standoffish and would not necessarily pleased to deal with the African Americans in Hope, Arkansas. My parents had a much better relationship with the merchants in the city of Prescott, Arkansas, which is the county seat in Nevada County, primarily because during the 30s and 40s, especially during World War II, the school didn't have enough money to pay the teachers their salary. So the merchants in Prescott would basically loan them the goods with the promise to pay. During the time I was a teenager in Hope, Arkansas, I would try to get jobs doing things in the summer. I did shine shoes on the streets in Hope, Arkansas, just to make a little money, 5 cents a shine at the time. I was involved primarily in the church. It was the only thing I did in Hope was go to church. My father was a Methodist and my mother was Baptist, so I would go one church or the other. Eventually my dad came over to become a Baptist as well. The Baptist church is Lone Oak Missionary Baptist Church, and it's still there. And the Methodist church was Bethel AME Church, which is still there. As I grew older, I got involved in other things. I started playing music in high school, so I would practice there, and I'd play piano as well. I learned piano because my godmother there in Hope was a piano teacher, and therefore I was required to take piano. It was not voluntary. At least I didn't feel it was voluntary. I was not athletically inclined, but we did play sandlot baseball and that kind of stuff. During my high school years, I was the statistician for the basketball team. Our school did not have a football team. We only had a basketball team. In fact, we had a world-class basketball team at the time. Our little school in Ralston won the state championship, actually, while I was there. Being the statistician enabled me to travel with the team throughout the state. In the segregated South, all the black schools played each other. We did not play any of the white schools at the time. Typical rural Arkansas schools at that time would also have a vocational program going. The idea was when you finish your schooling at the school, you were able to do everything necessary to maintain a farm. Most people are farmers in that area. As such, all the students were required from 9 through 12 to do vocational agricultural training, where we learned to be a farmer, how to grow crops, how to maintain crops. We also learned how to maintain the whole farm itself. So I learned plumbing, I learned electricity, I learned welding. I know all of that stuff. So that was a part of the curriculum in the school that you had to learn that. We were all part of the program called New Farmers of America. And in that program, you learned, how to run a meeting. We learned parliamentary procedure. and B, you learn how to grow and take care of animals. So when I was growing up, my junior and senior year, one year I had a calf that I raised from a baby and had taken to the county fair and showed off my calf. I think I won third place with the calf, and then the next year I got a pig, a baby pig, which I raised and then showed off at the county fair, and he came in second place. As a farmer, I learned how to be a farmer. And so that's one of the skills that I still have in my back of my mind, and it's what we do, what we learned. My father's family members migrated during the Great Migration, and most of my father's family migrated to the Midwest, to Detroit, Chicago, Illinois, Indiana area for jobs. My mother's family migrated to the far west, Seattle, Oregon, California. So we would visit the people in the Texas, Arkansas area a lot. We took one trip west that I remember growing up when we drove from Arkansas all the way to Los Angeles, California, which was quite a trip. If you know much about Texas, it's like 800 miles across Texas. Well, we drove all the way across Texas, and my dad didn't even stop until we got to New Mexico. And there in New Mexico, we went to a motel, and I remember him asking the motel, "Do you allow colored people to stay in your motel?" So we spent the night in this motel in Lordsburg, New Mexico. I remember the name of the town. And then we drove on to California. And same thing coming back. We stopped the same place. Oh, we had a huge class. There were 28 of us when we graduated, which was big for that time. I graduated at valedictorian. The schools at that time would make sure that your graduation was a formal event. We wore cap and gowns. You did the formal marching in, the formal marching out, and I gave a speech at my graduation. I can't remember what I talked about. We had a baccalaureate service as well, which is a church service as a part of the graduation program. All of this occurred at the school building itself, in the gymnasium. In the 40s, there was no high school in the state of Arkansas where the basketball team could play indoors, except at the college, at Arkansas A&M. And so we had a gymnasium at our school, and that was the only black school in the state of Arkansas where they had a gymnasium up through the 1950s, when some of the other schools began to get gymnasiums. So all the basketball that occurred was done outside on dirt. It was on dirt courts. Growing up in Arkansas, if you went to college, most kids would go to Arkansas A&M school or went to Tuskegee. However, I chose my school because my father's sister was married to a professor at Texas Southern University. And actually, he was a dean of the technical school there. And we had visited Houston several times. And so I decided to go to Texas Southern to college. Texas Southern University is a historically black college in Houston, Texas. It began in the 20s as Houston College for Negroes, and there was a Houston College for whites right down the street. There were two schools that were established about the same time. In the 1940s, a gentleman by the name of Sweat decided he wanted to go to law school at University of Texas. Well, that didn't go well, so the State Department of Education says, no, we will create you a law school in Houston where you can go to school so you won't have to interact with white students. And that's how Texas Southern University became into existence in 1947. It had a law school, which was the beginning. And actually, Mr. Sweat never went to school at Texas Southern, even though Thurgood Marshall had his case and pushed it through the system. He actually went to law school somewhere else. And then it developed a College of Education, pharmacy school, and College of Technology. I had a good fraternity brother from Tennessee, and he came to Texas Southern because pharmacy was not available to him in the state of Tennessee unless he went to one of the white schools, and that was not allowed at that time. So the state of Tennessee would pay for him to go to out of state to go to school at Texas Southern. Same thing for Mississippi. So that's the beginning of the university. My uncle actually was at Hampton University at the time, and he went down to Texas Southern to become the dean of the School of Technology. I started Texas Southern when I was 16 in 1960. I remember the first day on campus, that's when you have to go register, and that was my first introduction to the complications of deciding what classes to take. So that was a big deal for me. And secondly, is my first time really away from home. Moving into a dormitory was an interesting thing. We had 3 roommates at the time, so we had a lot of fun as freshmen. The cafeteria food was it was good, it was okay. I'll put it like this, it was not great. It was not home cooking, it was not what I was used to from home. I started out in pre-med as a major at Texas Southern, but my freshman biology class made me figure out that I did not really like biology. To me, it was illogical the way the biological stuff was structured and the titles and names of things you had to memorize. It just didn't fit with my logic. I didn't like memorization. I like to be able to figure something out logically, work through a process. If you start out with a basic theory and a basic understanding of the layout, you can come to a conclusion on things that way, but you can't in biology. You just gotta know some stuff. My first semester, I didn't do very well. I didn't do well at all. In fact, I almost flunked out of school. And at that time, your grades were sent home. So that was not a good situation to be in, having 2 parents who are teachers, a dean of the School of Technology as your uncle, and you're about to get thrown out of school is not a good situation. So I learned how to study after that, and in fact, the next semester I made all A's in all of my classes. I did have a saxophone, and so I joined the college band my freshman year and performed with the band. I marched in the marching band. We performed at football games and marched in the parades and that kind of thing. So that was my freshman year. The second semester, after I figured out that I needed to not necessarily focus on having fun, which is what I was doing, and I needed to focus on my classwork, I even dropped band after the first year.
Didn't wanna be an alpha, definitely not Omega Psi-Phi.
I pledged Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, which is one of the 9 African-American fraternity and sororities in the country.
My daddy was a Kappa.
When I hit the campus, there were some other young men from Arkansas. They grabbed me immediately and got me involved in the fraternity's pledge club, which I participated in. And technically, if you do well, you can work through the pledge club for a year, and then first semester of your second year, you could become a full member of the fraternity. However, because of my poor grades in my freshman year, I did not have the grade point average to make it in my fall semester of my second year, so I had to wait until the spring semester to become a member, which was in 1962. I was sent away to leadership training for the fraternity, which they held, and I would attend the various meetings, and I became actually the vice polemarch, or the vice president of the local chapter there at Texas Southern, my senior year. The fraternity had 2 really functions, and one is to help each other. So we mentored each other. A lot of the fraternity members would help me with my classwork, and I would help other people. So that was one aspect, and the other aspect is strictly social. So we had parties that we would participate in and socialize on campus. We were very active in student life, and we always worked to ensure that we got our members in leadership roles on campus. So some of our members were like student body presidents or student council presidents. I participated in student council during my school year, and I was also in student court my senior year. Mrs. Rose McKinley was my freshman chemistry major when she became Rose Henderson, who lives in Delaware. And actually, when I started work here in Delaware, I ran into her again and said, "Oh, you work in Delaware, work for the same company I do." So that was interesting there. But the head professor at Texas Southern was a guy by the name of Lloyd Woods. He was over the science section of the liberal arts school, and he was the man of the building. He ran the whole science building, and he called it his building. And you respected him, and he respected you. The strict part is that he was intolerant of tardiness. He did not like it at all. There was a bell that would ring that says it's time to start the class. If more than half of your body was not through the door when that bell rang, he would tell you, "Come back next time because you didn't make it this time." He would not let you in his classroom if you were late. He did not tolerate being late. And since my last name started with a B, the first name he would call when he called the roll was Mr. Bazzelle. So I was always had to be first in line and had to be first there. We call him the Bear because of his discipline. He required his students to learn what they needed to learn in order to become successful. And he worked hard to ensure that all of his students did a good job in school, and he worked hard to make sure of that. And actually, he was a member of my fraternity as well, which was interesting. And at that time, as part of the pledging process, you needed to always call the members of the fraternity, if you were a pledgee, you call them big brother. Well, he was my big brother, and it's kind of hard to say, "Dr. Woods, would you sign my book?" because we had to get signatures of big brothers in our book. So it was interesting, but that was a fun part of the whole thing. Dr. Wilson was also there. I worked for him my junior and senior year. I was a part of his program. He did research and would hire his students to work in the lab. We were working on ways to improve the polymer work in terms of how the polymers interacted and the chemicals interacted. My role was strictly to run the analyses, run the test. And in fact, I eventually majored in full-time in analytical chemistry, so I was doing analytical work for him. John Biggers, art professor at Texas Southern University, a renowned artist himself. He did a lot of murals, and in fact, the second floor of the main classroom building, the liberal arts building, had a mural going the whole hallway that he had prepared for that. When my daughter attended Hampton University, we learned that the murals at the library at Hampton University were done by Dr. Biggers. He's a very prominent artist, well-renowned for his murals and his paintings, depicting African-American situations. At Texas Southern, we had a well-renowned track team, and it was coached by Coach Wright. Coach Wright led the team, I believe in 62 or 63, the track team held the world record in, at that time, the mile relay. In the late 50s and early 60s, before I got to TSU in 60, the graduates from the track program were the first time African-American football players, because the track boys could run fast. That's where the wide receivers really got started. A couple of the wide receivers actually came from Texas Southern and went to like the Houston Oilers or Dallas Cowboys to become wide receivers because they could basically outrun any other football player. Yeah, he was a well-renowned track coach and in fact coached the Olympic team, I believe, in 1968. I remember to this day my first day in the class of Dr. Thomas Freeman, because we were all sitting in the class and he came in from the back of the room and he introduced himself to us by saying, On this day, and I don't remember the specifics, but on the 5th day of X month, in the year of our Lord, 1931, a great bundle of joy came into the household of his parents. And that great bundle of joy was Thomas Freeman. He is now here to teach you this wonderful class of philosophy. That just blew everybody away. And that's the way he taught the whole class, the whole semester. And not being a philosophy major, not interested in any of the humanities, it is one of the only classes in humanities that I truly remember and am pleased that I ever had a chance to sit down and listen to him, because he made the class interesting. He made, through the way he spoke, he made you interested in what he had to say by the inflections in his voice and the emotions and the use of hand gestures, which is how he became a great debate coach, because he enabled his students to make their words tell a story in a convincing way.
This expresses my idea of democracy. Whatever differs from this, to the extent of the difference, is no democracy. Thank you.
U.S. Representative Barbara Jordan, who had the opportunity to sit on the Watergate Commission. She learned her ability to speak, and in his words, make your words tell a story, and she was able to learn that process. And she is now one of the renowned graduates of Texas Southern University. John F. Kennedy came to the campus actually the day before he was shot in Dallas, and I was actually in the science building, which overlooked the student center. The entourage came there, and I got a chance to see him. And then another time during the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King came to the auditorium and actually spoke, and I attended that, which was really fascinating to hear him speak in person.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper.
1963, which would be my junior year, a friend of mine had taken this experiment the previous year, and she mentioned it to me, and her mother was a professor there at the university. And so between her talking to me and I guess her mother talked to my uncle, they both decided that this might be something I would be interested in. So we applied to the Experiment of National Living, and I got accepted, and then I had the process of then try to raise money to pay for the whole thing, which was enabled to do through the help of my parents, my church, and just people voluntarily giving me funds to fund our trip. I would fly from Houston to New York, and I remember this is my first plane flight, and when it took off it was kind of scary, but anyway. And then there was a orientation session in New York at the hotel where all of the students from across the country were introduced to each other. And then we boarded a prop jet to fly to Germany. Then we met again in Frankfurt and had another orientation session. That's where we met our actual guide. And then we would travel by bus to Switzerland, to our various homes. I stayed with the Wackleys in Jens, Switzerland, which is a suburb of Biel, Switzerland, which is a small industrial town in Switzerland. And this family was a family of architects. So they were one of the prominent families in the community. A part of the experimental national living was that you go live with a family in a foreign country, and you become a part of their family. You become a member of their family. And in exchange for them putting up with you for this time period, a family member of theirs would then travel the country doing the touring part. So my Swiss mother, sister, was a young student, and she would travel with us while we traveled. It's a beautiful country. I love it a lot. I learned about the history of Europe, if you will. This was really something new to me, to see the old buildings, the old cathedrals, and things like that. The people, the way people act, the way people talk, and the fact that I was the only African American in my group. I'm the only African American in this little small community. So it was my first time being away from a group of being around a majority of African Americans as opposed to being the only one that's there. But that was part of the learning, part of the education, and something that I'm thankful that I went through at the time. I graduated in August of 1964. I graduated in August because for some reason I decided I didn't need to take physical education, but it was required for me to get a degree. So I had to stay for summer school to take phys ed, to the chagrin of my parents. They were about to choke me, but anyway, I was too close to graduation to worry about it at that point. Dr. Woods talked to me about what I wanted to do when I graduated from college. And I told him that, well, I guess I'm going to teach because there's nothing else for me to do. But he told me, he said, well, why don't you consider grad school? And I said, no, I'll think about it, sure. I said, but I'm not sure my parents can afford it. So he enabled me to get an offer of a assistantship at Wayne State University, University of Arizona, and University of Alberta. So I had a choice of those three schools where they would pay me a small stipend to go to school, and that stipend will enable me to go to school for free. So I chose Wayne State University in Detroit as my graduate school, and the reason for that, I had an aunt and an uncle living in Detroit at the time, and a lot of cousins up there. So I said, well, I'll go to Detroit, but that's where Wayne is. I didn't know anybody in Arizona, and I didn't know anybody in Alberta, Canada, so I decided I'd go to Wayne. I was not prepared. The only coat I had when I left Texas Southern was an unlined raincoat, basically. And my first day in Detroit, I nearly froze to death in September because the temperature dropped, and I'd never seen temperatures like that. It just got cold. So I had to get a new wardrobe in Detroit. That was my first introduction to the Midwest and my first introduction to that cold weather and the snow. We had a lot of snow in Detroit. Contrary to what we had at Texas Southern, where we had relatively small classes and you could have some interaction with the professor, at Wayne State, the freshman and sophomore classes were taught in big auditoriums with hundreds of students. So the teacher's assistants, which I was, would then have small meetings with small groups of students. That was how I earned my salary, and that enabled me also to get free tuition while there. My third year, I got a fellowship, so I didn't have to work my last year. One of the first impressions that I had was that the academic work, to me, was easy because the academic structure at Texas Southern was so difficult that when I got to Wayne, we had no trouble working there. And in fact, a lot of my friends who went to school there, I have another friend who actually got his MD at Wayne State as well. He's my fraternity brother as well. And he said the same thing, that he had no trouble in med school after going through Texas Southern. So my impression is Wayne State is an outstanding school. I had no problems at Wayne State as an African American. Everyone was welcoming to me. I socialized a lot with the fraternity chapter there in Detroit, both the undergrad and graduate chapter. So the social side was taken care of and the academic side was fine. The professors were very nice to me. I think the fact that I was able to get an assistantship, the civil rights movement probably had something to do with that, so I would say I did benefit from being an African-American student at the time, but I got no special treatment at school. I mean, I was in the class with everybody else, and I competed against everyone else there. The first few days of being in a classroom, being the only African-American in the class was a strange feeling. It took a while, but I finally got over that. That was something that you just had to deal with and get through it. I started at Wayne to get my master's degree, and then about a year into my master's degree, Dr. Schenck came to me and asked me, he said, you know, we have a program here where you don't have to get a master's in order to get a PhD, so why don't you just move over to the PhD program, which I did. I did analytical research working on novel ways to measure and identify chemicals using sulfuric acid as a solvent, which is very corrosive, so my lab coat had holes all in it because it burns right through you. But yeah, that was what my professor was focused on, was how to measure various chemicals in various media, whether it's, you don't use the normal medias of water or alcohol or acetone or those kinds of things. He was doing novel studies to that. So it was just esoteric research. My dissertation was on how to measure boron products in sulfuric acid media. In the last couple of quarters of my semester, I began looking for jobs. And all of the students there, both male and female, who were all in the same situation I was, were looking for jobs together. And so we would consider where to apply, who to apply with. Same time, these recruiters would come into the school to have recruiting days. So I signed up and actually was invited to travel to Chicago, to Sinclair Oil. I went down to St. Louis, to Monsanto. Did not interview with Dow Chemicals because I was advised, because I'm a boy from the South and it was cold in Detroit, that Dow's location was further north in Michigan, which would be too cold for me to deal with. Then I applied to DuPont and was invited here to Delaware. And I interviewed here at the experimental station, Chambers Works Jackson Laboratory over there, and the laboratory at Rapano Works in New Jersey. I chose the experimental station because the experimental station looked like a college campus to me, so that's where I started work, simply because of the location. I started work at the analytical department and plastics department in September of 1967. I just defended my dissertation at Wayne State and drove to Delaware. I drove here, and the company assured me that I shouldn't have any difficulty finding a place to live and that kind of thing. So when I first started work, I began the process of going through the newspaper, identifying apartments to go and get a place to live. I would call, and people would say, yes, we have an apartment available. Come out and see. And when I show up, oh, we just rented it yesterday. Sorry. That went on for about 3 days, and so until I went to my boss and said, I can't find a place to stay. No one would allow me to live in their apartment. And so with the assistance of Delbert Glover and my supervisor, I was able to locate housing in Newcastle. And that's where I spent my first years, 2 years actually, living in Newcastle. The scientists I remember, Dan James, I believe he worked at the Chambers Works operation in Jackson Lab. Dick Cooper was here. Delbert Glover and Clay Smith was here also. There were so few African Americans here, so we all networked together. So we spent a lot of time talking about our jobs, our relationships, and that kind of thing. And in fact, during that time, we formed the Black DuPont Employees Association. We socialized together, networked together, and just talked through problems and talked through issues that we were seeing on a daily basis. If you had an issue, you were wondering, is this me or is it them or who is it? You can talk to someone else about your situation. In one of my first managerial assignments, I was working with an employee problem, and I called Dick to get his advice on that, and he was willing to help me with that. Dick Cooper was well respected by everyone. Everyone respected him, understood his talents and capabilities, and therefore we all just felt he was a good person to be around. I came in '67, and so I did outside research on ion electrodes, in addition to working on fluoropolymers, polyethylene as well, trying to make sure that the variations that they were trying to put together would be commercially successful. And so we would run tests on those things. In the wet lab, I was there probably a year and a half, and then I moved to the nuclear magnetic resonance machine where I spent the last few years at the station. Then I moved to the gas chromatograph lab.
You're as pretty as a picture.
My wife, her name is Minnie Bazzelle. We met at church in Hope, Arkansas. We grew up together. We would go to church together, and we went on church trips together, that thing. So I've known my wife several years before we got married. I went to school at Texas Southern, and she went to school at Bishop College in Dallas. So we would always get back together during the holiday weekends while we were in college. So we've been together a long time. And I worked here a year, and then I just decided I wanted to get married. So I proposed, and she said yes, thankfully.
For I love you and adore you.
She was teaching in Arkansas, and so we got married in December, and I convinced her that it was best for her to move here, so she had to quit her job there, which she didn't want to do. But she did. She moved to Delaware and began substitute teaching in the spring here until we had our first child. At that time, teachers didn't get maternity leave. You either worked or you resigned, so she had to resign. She stayed out of classroom for 5 years, I guess, during which time she got a master's degree. Then went back to work after that. She worked in the classrooms in Texas, and then she moved back to Delaware. She was principal at Shortledge Academy in the city of Wilmington. And she was enabled to get that school out of school improvement to where it had the best test scores in the city, and in fact was one of the only schools in Delaware that was visited by Mrs. Bush during the Bush presidency. Ms. Bush came to our school to see how well they were doing. 70-71, you make a decision as what kind of career you want to have in the company. And at the time, I had a newborn at home in 1970, so I decided I was not interested in marketing or sales because that would require a lot of travel. I didn't want to be away from home, and so I chose manufacturing. And so then I was assigned to put together, with another two chemists, the analytical laboratory for a new facility being built in LaPorte, Texas. The LaPorte plant produced the polyethylene and other polyethylene derivatives. Primary product of that facility is polyvinyl alcohol, which is the polymer used in the inner layer of your windshield, so that if you break the glass won't shatter, it'll still stick together. I was a chemist there in the lab for 2.5 years. In fact, I got my first promotion there at that laboratory. I was transferred to the Sabine plant in Orange, where I spent the bulk of my time in Texas. I did a lot of outside work. I was on the boards of the YMCA there. I was also elected to the school board there, where I served for 6 of those 8 years while I was in Texas. And in addition to that, I was president of the Regional School Board Association while I was there. And that enabled me to, again, help students. The whole idea was, how can I better the student life? And if you know anything about Orange County, Texas, at that time was the Ku Klux Klan of Texas headquarters county. And so dealing with a school board where I'm the only African-American member in an integrated school board situation, you can kind of know a lot of the stuff that you got into, and it became a lot of trade-offs because a lot of them didn't want our kids to be in the class with their kids, but it's tough. That's the way it's going to be. And so that we had to make sure we worked through all of that process. At that time, DuPont and a lot of other companies as well were interested in identifying African American or minority engineers to work for the company.
In 1972, there were 65,000 engineers graduated in the United States of America. Of that 65,000, fewer than 500 were black. Fewer than 800 were women. This means that fewer than 1% of the engineers graduated in 1972 were black.
They asked me to go to the engineering schools, Texas A&M, Lamar University, and University of Texas, to try to identify students who would be interested in working at an internship in DuPont at the facility. So I would interview students through their professors and let the professors recommend students and try to encourage them to come work at our facility. So they get an idea of what engineering work's all about, as well as an idea of what DuPont's all about. In my thinking, and I still believe today, I spent too much time in Texas. I should not have been there that long. And I got better opportunities by moving out of Texas and moving back to Delaware in terms of promotions, in terms of job diversification and better experience. I transferred back to Delaware and working in a staff group for the head of the research division for polymer section of DuPont. From that job, was promoted to intellectual property manager, which was responsible for the patents organization, as well as the technology sales group. Tech sales was the interesting part from my perspective because we were trying to sell the products to various parts of the world. So that enabled me to travel to Armenia, Russia, China, Japan, those kind of areas to sell technology or to look at technology. In the mid-60s, it became apparent to the organization of NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, that they had almost no black engineers or scientists in the NASA program there in Texas. So the NASA people in Houston came to my uncle, Dr. Bridges A. Turner, the dean of the School of Technology at Texas Southern University, and asked him if he could assist in identifying students who would want to eventually become and work for the NASA program as engineers. And he initiated a program there in Houston called the Minority Manpower Resources Project, which is a part of the Texas Southern University's programs. And out of that program began to expand across the country. And in fact, he came to Delaware and worked with the president of DuPont to develop the FAME program here, which started, I believe, in 1973. And so that's how FAME got started. The idea of FAME was to identify students who would be interested in STEM with the idea of getting them into engineering. That was the whole intent. That was how it started. It was an enrichment program for students to expose them to engineering, give them an opportunity to see what engineers do, give them an opportunity in their junior and senior years to intern in one of the industries around this area. Initially, DuPont brought in John Mathis to run the FAME program, and he was a DuPont employee. FAME was operated out of the DuPont Company, and actually out of the DuPont building downtown was where the FAME office was housed and was totally funded by DuPont at the time. In the mid-'80s, I was assigned to the FAME board as a liaison. And around that same time was when DuPont decided it was going to back away somewhat from FAME and continue to provide funding. They then hired the next director, who was Bazzelle Sr, the guy Moloch, and he maintained the program through the years. FAME has evolved over the years from being fully funded by DuPont to where it was then funded by other industries and DuPont. And then it went through a cycle where most of the industries began to back away, but through the work with Mr. Moloch and the state legislature to provide funding, and that enabled us to keep the operation going. If we hadn't gotten the state funds, FAME would have gone under. When the programs were first started, through the work of my uncle working with the various industries and the NACME organization, they were able to start these kinds of programs in every major city in the country. I know there was one in Detroit, there was one in St. Louis, there was one in Los Angeles, and one in Chicago, and all of them have gone away because the industries have backed away from funding, and so they've just disappeared. It's been difficult to try to identify positions for students to work as interns. FAME is still working to make that happen. So it's been a good task, One that I really enjoyed because I can almost say this, that 100% of the FAME students go on to college somewhere. 90% of those students major in a STEM field, although they don't all major in STEM fields. For example, one of my kids did not. She became a lawyer, so that's one thing. Whereas my son did. He's an engineer. So it's made the impact on the community. A large number of FAME students are doing wonderful work around the country. The director of FAME now is Donald Baker. We hired him about 6 or 7 years ago, and he's done an excellent job of broadening the FAME base, broadening the impact the FAME has not only on the students but on the community. And so FAME now is doing a broad spectrum of stuff and exposing a lot more students. The initial FAME program was dealing with students from 6th grade to 12. Under Donald, they've expanded that to where now FAME is touching and brought in younger students. It has a trademark title called STEM Ulate Change, which is a trademark word that they created, and that process involves younger kids. And they've created literature, and so it's a much broader program today. I'm a member of Easton Mount Carmel United Methodist Church, and we joined that church when we moved back to Delaware in 1984. I've had most offices in the church locally. Also worked with the conference office in Dover in church programs. I was responsible for the higher education ministry program in the conference, as well as served on the vision team, which is the component that makes strategic decisions about ministerial programs. I've also served on the conference board of trustees for 4 years as well. And I did receive the regional award for that work in the church. Out of that came also an opportunity to serve on the board at Wesley College, which I did, I guess, about 6 or 7 years. The members of the fraternity who are no longer in college, our particular role is to try to assist other youth to do better. We're always doing what my wife calls reaching back as you climb. So as you move ahead, you reach back and pull all others along with you. Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity has been around since 1911. Our main focus is improving the lives of its members and improving the lives of the community. As alumni members of the fraternity, we do more than just socialize. We do things to improve the community that we live in. Our main focus here in the Wilmington area is to make sure that black male youth become successful adults and contribute back to the society. My main focus over the years has been to try to identify students that need help and get them the help they need. We want to make sure that every child has an opportunity. Every child who wants to do things can get things done. And our intent is to keep kids out of the justice system and make sure that they become successful adults. We've developed a lot of programs over the years, several of which identify students and make sure that they get funding for colleges and those kinds of things. Our mentoring programs are non-structured or non-formal programs, so we use other things to provide that impact. We had a program at the Bancroft School for about 25 years, as long as Maurice Pritchett was there, who's a member of our fraternity, as principal. That program will enable us through basketball as the draw for the kids. But the discussions with the members of the fraternity would always focus on how is your homework, are you getting your work done, are you having any difficulties, what do you plan to do with your life, how about considering these kinds of jobs, those kinds of jobs. So we do the mentoring in a way of not causing the student to know what's really happening to them, if you will. We support school programs in the county of Newcastle. We have an Achievers program, which we do with the Wilmington Chapter of the Links. That's a joint program where we bring in 11th and 12th grade students give them a 6-month training program to enable them to become better students. They enable them to become better persons. And that program actually has been in existence since 1987. And it's really interesting for me today to walk down the street and I'll run into some adult now and they'll say, hey, Dr. Bazzelle, remember me? And I don't remember them at all, but but it's just nice to know that they recognize and remember that the impact that we had on them. So we've had an impact on a large number of students. In that program, we've had about 700 students to go through it over the years.
I lift a cup of joy and health.
Several years ago, 2 of our fraternity members had an idea that we needed a facility as a resource point for our programs. And we wanted to have a facility in an area where we could have the most impact on African American youth. So we identified some real estate on Vanderbilt Avenue in Wilmington, in a highly impacted area. It's the same area where the prison is right now, same area where a lot of the prisoners come back where they live, and it's one where it needs the most attention in terms of helping students. The grade accomplishment level there is lowest in the state of Delaware. So that's where we located our facility. I said at that point that I would take on the responsibility of completing the building. And so I've been chairman of that foundation, which is a nonprofit organization, since 2004. It's been my responsibility to make sure that building happened, and thanks to people like my fraternity brother, Dr. James Sills, and others have enabled me to make it happen. Dr. Tony Allen, who is one of my mentees, and also helped us to make it happen.
To those who loved and told.
It took us many, many years to go from a piece of real estate with a falling down building to a completed facility, which we have today. It's called the Achievement Center. We went through fundraising to identify capital funds to fund this. However, the 2008 financial crisis put a crunch on things, and then we had to partner with the Wilmington Hope Commission to actually finish the facility. So we co-own a building on Vanderbilt Avenue, a beautiful building, with the Wilmington Hope Commission, and their role is to keep youth and adults who go to prison and get out of jail not go back, whereas our role is to keep youth from never ever going in prison in the first place. So we coexist in the building. They are there Monday through Friday, and we work on the weekends. And we're now in the process of trying to expand the facility so we can do some more work Monday through Friday, but keep the youth separate from the Hope Commission clients.
We'll live for thee, we'll strive for thee.
The fraternity's youth program is called Guide Right. That is, you want to guide youth in the right direction. I was Guide Right Director for the chapter, and I've been Guide Right Director for this region, for the fraternity, which enabled me to serve on the National Commission for Guide Right for the entire fraternity for a few years. So I was able to visit other facilities and see what other chapters were doing in their communities, which we then bring back. We steal shamelessly from each other. To good ideas, we utilize them anywhere we can to help youth. That's the whole idea, is to help youth to be successful.
We'll long for thee and toil.
I have received most of the local awards and the regional awards from fraternity, and I have the highest award that the region offers, called the province. And in fact, our chapter has 4 members who received that highest award for the region. It's called the James M. Kidd Award. It's named for one of the former province polemarchs of the fraternity.
We'll long for thee and toil.
We try to recognize each other, to support each other. The fraternity was started to help each other, so we recognize each other. We pat each other on the back, and that's what the award's all about. It's just another way of saying thanks. We don't get any pay for what we do. It's just for fun.
We reach that golden shore. K-A P-S-I, Phi Nu Pi. I wanna be a Kappa till the day I die. A little boy, once was I never knew the meaning of a Phi Nu Pi. As I matured and I grew, it became time to go off to school. When I arrived, I was told about these men who thought a Phi Nu Pi was gold. They said to me, hey, look up, boy. If you look up, you'll see our greatest joy. Okay, A-P-P-A, A-L and a P-H-A. P-S-I, Phi Nu Pi. I wanna be a Kappa till the day I die. I must admit I misunderstood. These were Kappa concepts of true brotherhood. I said to them in passing by, please let me be a Kappa man before I die. Okay, A-P-P-A, A-L and a P-H-A. P-S-I, Phi Nu Pi. I wanna be a Kappa till the day I die.